Hi you guys, and welcome back to another makeup and true crime video. If you're new here, my name is Zara and I post content on beauty and makeup and true crime every week. So if you enjoy content like this, go ahead and leave me a comment down below telling me what you want to see next, and make sure to subscribe because I would love to have you join the fam. You guys, I literally have lost my voice from playing with my son. Like, we just scream all the time and I'm just in struggle town today, but I really wanted to film a video for you guys. So today's case is about Josef Fritzl and the creep that he is. And I don't know, I heard about this case like years ago, but you know, it's one of those cases that just sticks with you. Has that ever happened to you guys? Like, I always think about this case. It's just one that kind of creeps me out. So Josef Fritzl was born on the 9th of April, 1935 in Amstetten, Austria. And at the time, he was born out of wedlock, so he never knew who his father was. And in terms of his mother, he initially described her as the best woman in the world and that she was strict because it was necessary. But then later he used to claim that she used to beat him till he was lying in a pool of his own blood, and she used to leave him feeling humiliated and weak. And he said that his mother was actually a servant and she used to work hard her whole life, but she never kissed him, never showed him any affection, and all he ever wanted was like a cuddle from her or love from her. And he also claimed that she used to call him Satan, a criminal, a no-good man, and that he was terrified of her. Later in his life, he got a degree in electrical engineering, but then later on, as an adult, became a technical equipment salesman. And with this job, he would travel the whole of Austria. So in 1956, when he was 21 years old, he married a girl named Rosemary, who was 17 at the time. She was born on 23rd September 1939, and together they had 7 children, 3 sons and 4 daughters, including Elisabeth, who was born on 6th April 1966. And in 1959, after Joseph married Rosemary, his mother actually ended up moving in with them as well. So his daughter Elisabeth, when she was 15, after she finished all her compulsory education, she started a course to become a waitress. And then in January 1983, she actually ran away from home and went into hiding in Vienna with a friend. But she was found by police 3 weeks later and then, returned back to her home because she was still underage. So she rejoined her waitressing course, finished it by 1984, and was offered a job at a nearby suburb called Linz. So the home that she grew up in was actually built in the 1890s. And it was a really strange home. I'm not sure if all the homes in Austria at the time were like this, but it was this huge building and the family lived in one part of the home. And then they had this like apartment attached where they would rent it out, to tenants. And then in 1978, Joseph actually applied for a permit to build an extension in the basement of the building. And in 1983, building inspectors actually came, verified all the designs and agreed for that, extension to be built. But Joseph actually wanted it to be way bigger than he had applied for. So he illegally extended everything and just made it like a massive little maze under his home. And then he concealed everything with walls. So like you couldn't tell where, anything started and where anything ended really. And then in 1981 or 1982, he installed like a wash basin, a toilet, a bed, a hot plate, and he also put a fridge in there. And then in 1983, he extended it even more by creating this secret passageway that only he knew about. On 28th August 1984, Elisabeth was now 18, but she went missing. Her mother, Rosemary, quickly, filed a police report stating that she was missing, and she was pretty frantic about where her daughter could be, but considering that she had run away before, they just wanted to find her. And then for weeks, there was no word from Elisabeth. No one knew where she was. And her parents actually began to assume the worst. Then out of nowhere, a letter arrived from Elisabeth claiming that she was just totally over her family life and she ran away to live her own life. The police actually questioned her parents as to where Elisabeth could be, and Joseph told the police that he had no idea where she could be, but that she probably joined a religious cult because it was something that she had talked about previously. But the truth was that Joseph knew exactly where his daughter was. She was about 20 feet below where the officer was standing. So on 28th August 1984, the day that Elisabeth went missing, this was now a couple of weeks after she had turned 18, Joseph actually asked Elisabeth to help him carry a door into the new basement that had been, built. He also wanted her to help him install the door into a doorway of the basement. So while Elisabeth was holding the door in place while Josef, fitted it into the frame, he held an ether-soaked towel over Elisabeth's face, and then when she passed out and became unconscious, he threw her on the other side of the door. This was actually the last area of the passageway that he needed to seal Elisabeth into, which eventually turned out to be the chamber that she would be held captive in for the years to come. Okay, you ready? For the next 24 years, Josef held Elisabeth captive inside this dirty, tiny, wall-enclosed chamber, his own daughter, and continued to lie to Rosemary, his wife, and the police about where Elisabeth was. He would continuously feed them lies about how she had run away, joined this religious cult, and after a few months of this, the police eventually gave up because the case just ran cold. They didn't find anything about Elisabeth, and they just kind of gave up on it. And before long, the world just forgot about Elisabeth's disappearance. I mean, this kind of makes sense because her own father wasn't concerned about where she was, and her mother seemed to believe, the stories about where she could have been. And during this time, he actually made Elisabeth write letters, to her mom and himself, stating that, she ran away for a reason, and if they came looking for her, she would actually flee Austria and she would never be found again. As I mentioned before, when Josef was building, this basement, he had effectively been building, a dungeon for years and got permission to build this from the government. And at the time, it wasn't difficult to get approval to build underground constructions because it was at the height of the Cold War in Austria. And at the time, nuclear bunkers, were seen as necessary in an Austrian home. And the Austrian government actually gave him a grant of like a couple £1,000s at the time to build this basement. A total of 8 doors had to be opened before you could actually reach the cellar that Elisabeth was trapped in. The final door at the end of this dark chamber was actually the door that Elisabeth helped Josef install that he would trap her in. Josef would head down to that basement, at 9 a.m. every single morning to draw plans for the machinery that he sold. And sometimes he would even spend the night. But Rosemary, didn't seem to worry because Josef was a super hardworking man. He was so dedicated to his career, he would stay in the basement for hours. In Elisabeth's eyes, though, her father was a monster. At the minimum, he would visit her in the basement 3 times a week, but usually it was every single day. At first, when Elisabeth woke up, after being sedated by her father, she said she woke up being bound by an iron chain in a damp cellar, and she was unaware that this was the dungeon that her father had built for her. He strapped up her arms and tied them behind her back, and then he tied her to the metal posts on an iron bed. With these restraints, she could only move half a meter either side of the bed. He then violently raped his own daughter. And this abuse was just a continuation of the abuse that she experienced when she was just 11 years old, when her father would come and visit her bedroom every single night and rape her. And now we can understand why she tried to run away so many times. After 2 days of being trapped in the cellar, Josef gave Elisabeth a little bit more freedom by attaching the chain around her waist instead. And then 6 months into her imprisonment, he removed all chains completely because, it was hindering his sexual activity with his own daughter. The first few months, Elisabeth had to endure daily visits from her father. And during these assaults, he would cover her mouth with his hand so that it would hinder her breathing, but it would also stop her from screaming. It seems that Elisabeth, out of all, his 7 children, was the only one who endured this abuse from Josef. And we don't really know why, but considering that this abuse started when she was only 11 and that he married his wife when she was only 17, maybe he knew when Elisabeth turned 18 she was gonna finally leave him. And she tried multiple times to run away, but due to her being underage, she was always found and returned to her parents. During the time Elisabeth was held captive by her father, she gave birth to 7 children by him. These children's birth dates are all protected, so we don't actually know exact dates, we just have a rough timeline. So between 1988 or 1990, 4 years into her captivity, Elisabeth gave birth to a baby girl named Kirsten, and she was born and raised in this cellar. Another child, a boy named Stefan, is born soon after, and he was also born and raised in that cellar. So before her children were born, for 4 years, Elisabeth was just alone in that cellar. Like, I can't even. Then in May 1993, a 9-month-old baby girl named Lisa was discovered outside the family home with a letter supposedly from Elisabeth saying that she cannot care for this baby and that she wanted her parents to raise this child. Lisa was taken in by her grandmother, Rosemary, Elisabeth's mother, and Rosemary was happy to care for Lisa, knowing that Elisabeth was fine. She was happy to raise her granddaughter. So a year and a half later, in December 1994, a second baby girl named Monica magically appears on the doorstep of her parents' home in the exact same circumstances, with a letter from Elisabeth saying she cannot care for this baby and that she wanted her parents to raise her. So again, this baby girl named Monica was taken in by Joseph and Rosemary and was raised by them. Now at this point, if you're Rosemary, would you be questioning this? Just magical babies appearing on the doorstep, never seeing your daughter? Then in 1996, Elisabeth actually gives birth to twin boys, but one of the babies actually had breathing difficulty shortly after birth, and Joseph refused to get help for this baby. So this baby died 66 hours after he was born, and this poor baby was taken away by Joseph and is alleged that he burned the baby in an incinerator. So in 1997, a year later, this new boy, the surviving twin Alexander, again appears on the doorstep of the home. He was around 15 months old at the time, and again taken in just like the previous two daughters to be raised by Joseph and Rosemary. According to media reports, at this time, 1997, Joseph actually went on a vacation to Thailand, and he actually went for 4 weeks. So it's assumed and believed that, he left enough resources and food stores for Elisabeth and her other two children to live off of for 4 weeks. So in 2003, the family receives another letter from Elisabeth stating that she actually had another baby boy named Felix in December 2002, but this boy was actually the third child to be born and raised in that cellar with her other two children, Kirsten and Stefan. And shockingly, the officials never investigated or questioned these letters from missing Elisabeth and allowed Joseph and Rosemary to just raise these children appearing on their doorstep as their own. I guess because the police were actually under the impression that, these were the grandparents of those children, so someone had to raise them. So in 2008, Elisabeth's eldest child, Kirsten, actually becomes super sick. Kirsten's condition was worsening day by day, and on 19th April 2008, she actually became so sick that Kirsten actually became unconscious. Elisabeth begged Joseph to get Kirsten help, to take her to the hospital to get her checked out. And Joseph was really reluctant. He, basically kept refusing. He didn't even take a little baby newborn to the hospital, so why the hell was he going to take 19-year-old Kirsten? But Elisabeth kept begging and just told him, she really needs help. She's going to die. We need to take her to get checked out. And who knows, maybe it's his old age, the fact that he had kept them so bloody long trapped, or maybe it was the fact that Kirsten was his first granddaughter/child. So he finally agreed to go and get help for Kirsten. Elisabeth helped Joseph carry Kirsten out of the chamber, and for the first time in 24 years, Elisabeth saw the outside world. 24 years, Jesus. But as soon as they got Kirsten out of the chamber, Joseph forced Elisabeth back into the chamber and locked her back up. He then called an ambulance for Kirsten, and Kirsten was admitted to the hospital and placed under critical care. She was admitted in serious condition because she had life-threatening kidney failure. Joseph later arrived to the hospital claiming that he had found a note from Kirsten's mother, and he discussed Kirsten's condition and the note that he had found with a doctor named Albert Ryder. For an entire week, the police questioned Kirsten and asked the public if they knew any information on Kirsten's family, and naturally no one came forward as there was no family to speak of. The police eventually became super suspicious on Joseph and then reopened the case into Elisabeth's disappearance. They had begun to read all the letters that Elisabeth had left for her family, but then saw a ton of inconsistencies in those letters. Back at the chamber, Elisabeth pleaded with Joseph to bring her to the hospital so that she could be with Kirsten and take care of her while she was in this critical condition. She knew that Kirsten was all alone at the hospital and she wanted to be there for her in case her condition worsened. A child needs their mother. And Kirsten had never been outside those chambers, so imagine what she must have been feeling seeing all those people, the machinery in the hospital, the bed, it must have been so surreal for her. On 26th April 2008, Joseph finally released Elisabeth and her two sons, Stefan and Felix, bringing them upstairs for the first time. They then went to the hospital where Kirsten was, and the doctor that was in charge of Kirsten's case, Dr. Ryder, actually tipped the police off that Josef had come to the hospital with Elisabeth because he just had a bad feeling. He just knew something wasn't right. And the police ended up detaining Josef and Elisabeth and took them in for questioning. That night, Elisabeth was taken into custody and questioned about her disappearance and her joining this religious cult. And Elisabeth was terrified. She didn't know, what to say. She was essentially conditioned by her father not to say anything. But Elisabeth ended up making the police promise her that she'd never have to see her father again, and then she would tell them the truth. Once they made that promise, Elisabeth told the police about her 24-year imprisonment. She explained that her father had kept her locked in the cellar/basement for 24 years and that she had 7 children by him. She explained that Josef was the father of all 7 children and that he would come down in the night, make her watch pornographic films, and then abuse and rape her. She then went on to explain that he had been abusing her since she was 11 years old. The police ended up arresting Josef that very night. After Josef's arrest, the remaining 2 boys, Felix and Stefan, were officially released from the cellar, and Rosemary, his wife, fled the house. Rosemary allegedly knew nothing about Elisabeth's capture, even though it was happening right below her feet. And Josef actually backed up Rosemary's stories, claiming that, she did not know anything. The tenants who had lived in the apartment in that same home also claimed they knew nothing about, Elisabeth being in the basement. And Josef always explained away any noises by blaming them all on faulty piping or a noisy heater. So after his arrest, Josef's past was actually revealed. So in 1967, Josef actually broke into the home of a 24-year-old nurse, and this was while her husband was away, and he held a knife to her throat and he raped her while threatening to kill her. And he was also named as a suspect in the attempted rape of a 21-year-old woman, and Josef was actually also known for indecent exposure. He was arrested and served 12 months out of an 18-month prison sentence, but in accordance with the Austrian law, his criminal record was deleted basically after 15 years. So that's why when Elisabeth's children, appeared on his doorstep, he was actually allowed to adopt them because it had been more than 25 years since those arrests, so his criminal record was deleted. Social services actually did not know anything about his criminal past. And then remember his relationship with his mother? Over time, their roles actually reversed, and his mother actually became really terrified of Josef. Eventually, Josef actually admitted that he locked his mother in an attic and bricked up her window after telling neighbors that she had died, and he actually kept her locked up in this attic until her death in 1980. It's unknown exactly how long he kept his mother, locked up, but it's believed that he did so for more than 20 years. So this guy is clearly a freaking psychopath. And are you telling me that Rosemary really didn't know? Really? Where's his mom? You know what I mean? The trial of Josef Fritzl commenced on 16th March 2009. And on the second day of the trial against her father, Elisabeth actually attended the court because she was preparing for a book that she was about to write about her ordeal. But she didn't want to ever see her father again, so she actually attended the court in disguise. But during the trial, Josef looked up and he recognized Elisabeth through her disguise, and he realized that she was in court, and you could see Josef, he went pale and then he broke down. The next day, Josef went to court and he changed his pleas to guilty on all charges. On 19th March, 3 days into his trial, Josef Fritzl was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole for 15 years. He said that he accepted his sentence and he wouldn't appeal. Josef is currently serving his sentence out in Garston Abbey, which used to be a monastery, but now it's converted into a prison. An article in March 2010 stated that Elisabeth and her children were actually recovering really well given the years of hell that they had to endure. Elisabeth now says that she enjoys shopping, taking lots of showers, and she loves driving. All of Elisabeth's children have developed normal sibling relationships with each other, including the 3 that were raised by Rosemary and Josef. And even though they all have had trouble dealing with the traumatic events of their past, the 3 upstairs children, Lisa, Monica, and Alexander, slowly were recognizing Elisabeth as their mother instead of Rosemary, and the children love being outdoors, playing games, and spending time with Elisabeth and their grandmother, Rosemary. Despite their strained relationship, Elisabeth and Rosemary actually have developed more of a relationship, and they visit each other a lot. And Elisabeth has apparently, forgiven her mother for believing her father's story about, her capture. A British journalist who actually interviewed Josef in his cell says that Josef has shown no remorse for his crimes. He recalls Josef saying, "Just look into the cellars and basements of other people's homes. You might find little girls and families trapped down there." What a creep. Josef is so freaking scary to me. Like, his photos, you can see the evilness in his eyes. Like, you can see it. And there actually was a movie based off this case. I think it's called The Girl in the Basement. I did watch it, and it's insane. It's insane to kind of watch it come to life, but I'm pretty sure it's based exactly on this case. So I would highly recommend you go check it out if you found this case interesting. Let me know your thoughts below. What did you think of this? Have you heard about this story before? I hope you guys found it as interesting as I did. Thanks for watching, guys. If you want to go check out some of my other true crime videos, go ahead and click over here. And I will see you in the next one, guys. Besitos. Mwah. Bye.